the exact moment it started. Maybe it was the job you didn't get, the message left unread, the opportunity that never called you back. Maybe it was a slow burn, not a single instance but a gradual fading, a soft and persistent whisper that grew louder each time you failed to meet the version of yourself you thought you were supposed to be. You wake up, not energized, not even tired, just stalled. You go through your routines like an actor who forgot his lines but keeps performing anyway. And somewhere in your chest, the thought takes shape. Not in anger, not in panic, but in a cold, matter-of-fact tone. It's over for you. It doesn't sound like defeat. It sounds like certainty, like something already decided, something you didn't choose. You check your reflection and feel nothing. You scroll social media and feel everything. People you went to school with are running companies, touring cities, living polished lives with filtered meaning. Meanwhile, your greatest win this week was convincing yourself to send one email. You used to believe in potential, in possibility, in the idea that maybe, just maybe, your life was a story unfolding towards something worthwhile. But now, it feels like you missed your moment. Like the world was a bus, and you showed up at the wrong station with the wrong ticket, asking the wrong questions. It's over for you, the voice says again, quieter this time, but heavier. But you don't talk about this, you just carry it, like a weight in your spine that never shows up on X-rays. You smile, you joke, you show up on time, but inside, you're eroding. And it's not because something terrible happened. It's because nothing happened, nothing remarkable, nothing validating. You tried to build, you tried to reach, but the world didn't clap, didn't even blink. And now you're wondering if effort even matters, if dreams were just childhood delusions you were supposed to outgrow, like believing in magic, or fairness, or your own uniqueness. They lied to you, the world. The voices on stage, the books with golden spines. They said you could be anything, but they didn't say how long it would take, or how invisible you'd feel, or how much failure would feel like breathing. Automatic and constant. You tried to fight it at first, hustled harder, posted more, forced optimism into every word. But over time, the grind became noise, and the noise became static, and the static became silence. That's when it crept in, not loudly, but slowly, like rot. And now here you are, sitting with that phrase. It's over for you, not because you chose to quit, but because you're tired of pretending you haven't already lost. But what if I told you that's where it begins? You're not broken, you're not behind, you're not too late. What you are is early. Early in the chapter that no one talks about. The chapter where nothing makes sense. The chapter where doubt is louder than vision, where every hero feels like a background character in someone else's story. Where effort doesn't pay off. Not yet. Do you know how many people sat exactly where you are, convinced it was over, only to later become the very name people worship? Franz Kafka worked a soul-killing insurance job. He wrote at night, sick, tired, anxious, sure his writing was pointless. His stories were confusing, incomplete, and unpublished. He begged his friend to burn them when he died. If that friend had listened, the world would have lost one of its greatest literary minds. But Kafka never knew. He never saw the influence. He died in obscurity. To him, it was over. Emily Dickinson barely left her home. She wrote over 1,700 poems, most of which were never shared. The few that were published, edited so severely they barely resembled her voice. She must have believed the world didn't want what she had to say, so she withdrew, hid her verses in drawers, isolated herself with language no one seemed to understand, and yet, after she was gone, the world caught up. Suddenly her words mattered. Suddenly people felt seen, but not while she lived. You see, it's over for you isn't a prophecy, it's a test. Test to see if you'll keep creating even when the room is empty, if you'll keep believing even when there's no applause. Because that's where greatness is born, not in the spotlight, but in the shadows, when no one's watching, and you choose to try anyway. You are not failing, you are forming. You are not finished, you are fermenting. Like wine sealed in darkness, becoming something no one will taste until years later. But the process is real. The transformation is happening, even if no one notices. Let me ask you something. Do you think Van Gogh knew what his art would mean? He died believing he failed. Only one painting sold in his entire lifetime. One. He bled his soul into canvas after canvas, and the world responded with silence. He died poor, institutionalized, convinced he'd contributed nothing. Today his name is synonymous with beauty, madness, genius, and he never knew. That thought should terrify you and liberate you, because maybe you too are building something whose impact you'll never fully see. Maybe your work is not meant to serve you, but someone else, someone who needs it, someone who doesn't exist yet, or someone who hasn't found you yet. But none of it happens if you stop, because the difference between those who are forgotten and those who change the world isn't talent, it's persistence. It's the ability to keep walking when the road disappears, to keep writing when the words feel stupid, to keep speaking when the room is empty, to keep making when it feels pointless. This isn't a motivational quote, it's an uncomfortable truth. You will not always be seen, you will not always be praised. Most of the time, your work will feel like it's echoing in a canyon no one visits. And yet, you must keep going, because it's not over for you. It only feels that way because the reward hasn't arrived yet. But timing is a cruel judge. It gives you the lesson long before it gives you the reason. That's the deal. That's the rule. No one told you. You're allowed to cry. You're allowed to collapse. You're allowed to doubt. But you're not allowed to stop. Because the moment you stop, that is when it's over. And you know something? There's someone watching you. Not now, not yet, but later, years from now. They'll stumble on your words, your art, your video, your voice, and it will matter, not to millions, maybe just to them, but to them it will matter more than anything. But they only find it if you make it. So stop measuring your value by applause. Stop timing your worth by milestones. Stop asking the world to validate what you already feel in your chest. Because the moment you whispered, "I still want this," even while surrounded by doubt, that's the moment it began. The greatest stories begin after everyone thinks they're over. So go ahead, sit with the silence. Let the whisper say what it wants. But don't believe it. Because you are not done. You are not disqualified. You are not too late. You are simply in the middle of your becoming. The people who tell you it's over are people who stopped moving. Don't become one of them. You've barely started. You think it's failure because no one's clapping. But applause was never the measure. Legacy is not built in real time. It lingers like a ghost, haunting the years long after the person is gone. The question isn't, will you be recognized today? The question is, will your work whisper through the bones of tomorrow, even if you never hear it yourself? Most people never ask that question. Most don't care. They just want the dopamine now, the share, the like, the metrics to justify the effort. And when it doesn't come, they retreat, believing the silence is a verdict. That if the world doesn't cheer right now, then the work must be worthless. That if it's not viral, it's not valuable. But there's a group, rare and often forgotten, who kept building in the dark. Not because they knew they'd matter one day, but because something inside them refused to stop. That voice, the one that says, "This still matters to me even if no one sees it." That's the voice of greatness. And it almost always lives in people who believe they've already failed. Let's talk about failure. Let's talk about a man named Franz. He worked in a suffocating office. Insurance. Not stories, not ideas, just paperwork and quiet desperation. He came home from work, tired, sick, and ashamed, and wrote at night, alone, in a small room. Stories that were strange, dense, uncomfortable. He was sure they made no sense to anyone but himself. He didn't even finish most of them. When he died, he left a note asking his closest friend to burn everything. That friend, Max Brod, didn't listen. He preserved them, published them. And now, Franz Kafka is a towering literary figure, quoted, dissected, revered. But Franz died with the belief that it was over. He never saw his impact. He never heard the applause. His name became myth, but he died a ghost. Or consider Emily, a recluse, a woman who barely left her home. She spent her days gardening, studying the sky, and writing poetry that the world wouldn't read for decades. When her work was published in newspapers, it was edited beyond recognition. Her voice was silenced in the name of readability. She must have felt erased. After she died, her sister discovered nearly 2,000 poems, tucked away in drawers, bound in ribbons, hidden from view. Today, Emily Dickinson is one of the most studied poets in history. Her structure, her slant rhymes, her ferocity masked in calm, revolutionary. But she never knew. She died believing the world had no place for her voice. This is what the phrase, "it's over for you," does. It wraps itself around the minds of the brilliant, not because they lack genius, but because genius rarely looks like success when it's born. It looks like madness, like wasting time, like delusion. Until the years pass, and suddenly everyone pretends they always saw the brilliance. But they didn't. They saw nothing, they mocked, they ignored, they rejected. Vincent van Gogh sold a single painting while he was alive. One, for the price of a cheap meal, and that was to a friend. He bled paint and sorrow into his work. Starving, exhausted, hallucinating, he painted anyway. Not because he thought it would make him famous, but because he couldn't not paint. It was how he stayed alive. When he died, the world yawned. He was filed away as another failure, but his sister-in-law, Johanna, believed otherwise. She collected his work, protected it, shared it, and little by little, the world began to realize what it had ignored. Now his paintings are priceless. His name is immortal. His brushstrokes have changed the language of art. And yet, Vincent never saw a single museum wall with his name on it. He died in obscurity. Alfred Wegener, the scientist who first proposed continental drift, was laughed out of the room. He had the wrong credentials. He didn't sound like a geologist. His ideas were dismissed as fantasy. Other scientists held conferences just to ridicule his work. But Alfred believed in his evidence. He kept publishing, kept arguing, kept looking, and he died still ridiculed, still alone in his belief. Years later, others picked up his work, proved it, built on it. And now, every student who opens a geology textbook learns about the plates he first described. He reshaped earth science and never lived to know it. You start to see a pattern, don't you? The greatest thinkers, the boldest voices, the most visionary creators, almost none of them were understood in their lifetime. Most believed it was over. They felt the same stillness you do, the same doubt, the same dread that their work would vanish without mattering. But they still made it. That's the part no one tells you. They kept writing, kept painting, kept sketching ideas on scraps of paper. They continued, not because they thought they'd win, but because something deep inside said, I can't leave this undone. And maybe that's all greatness really is. Not talent, not timing, but defiance. You feel unseen, good. That means you're in the right place. That means you haven't been diluted, you haven't been repackaged, you haven't been pulled into the gravity of attention. You still have the purity that comes from working in silence. That's where legends are formed. It's not glamorous, it's not easy, it's rarely fun, but it's sacred. So, next time that voice says, "It's over for you," imagine Kafka sitting at his desk, coughing up blood, finishing a story no one would read. Imagine Van Gogh, teeth chattering, painting stars through his asylum window. Imagine Dickinson, alone in her room, writing poems to no one, about everything. Imagine Wagner, scribbling equations in a tent during a blizzard, believing the continents were not what we thought they were. And then imagine yourself, in your room, at your desk, creating not because it will pay off, but because it has to be done. Not for glory, not for fame, but for the person you'll become if you finish it. You are not alone. You are among ghosts. And if you keep going, one day someone will join your ghost story. They'll find your work, your words, your songs, your sketches. They'll feel it in their bones. And they'll say, "How did we almost miss this?" That is how resurrection happens. Not with trumpets, with whispers.